The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to Florida Association Museums Lunch and Learn series, The Fundamentals of Fundraising. We're bringing this to you in conjunction with Stansbury Consulting. Thank you all for being here this morning. My name is Carmen Godwin and I am the FAMF Program Manager. This is a 4-part webinar series, and the next program that we have coming up will be July 18th. Always Advocacy. Melinda Horton is joining with Gregory Black, who is a lobbyist and also a fundraising professional from the Bailey, from the Bishop Museum, will be joining Martha Wells. So that will be a great program. We hope you all can join us for that on July 18th. I want to thank our partners, Visit Florida, and the Florida Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs, as well as Stansbury Consulting. So today, again, I'm Carmen Godwin. I'm the FAM Program Manager. If you have any questions as we go through the program for me or for Alice Lee, please just type those into the chat box. For this webinar, it is recorded. I need to just make you aware of that. As well, there will be a couple question breaks as we go through this, but if you have questions as you go along, just type those in and I will make sure that Alice Lee gets those as we go through the presentation or during one of those question breaks as we go through as well. There will be 2 polls during the presentation where Alice Lee Stansbury will be switching that back over to me. I'll provide a poll. We'll have about 10 seconds or so. We're just trying to get feedback on how your operations work within your specific organizations so that we can make sure that we're addressing any issues that you might have specifically. So please participate in those polls and we will show you the results right afterwards. And then finally, when we're finished with the webinar today, I will send each of you an email with a survey. I'd really appreciate if you are able to complete that for us because it does help us in developing new programs in the future and also improving upon the programs that we're able to provide. Our guest speaker today, Alice Lee Stansbury, is the president of Stansbury Consulting. She has over 25 years experience as a fundraiser and as an advisor in nonprofit management and board development. She is one of our favorite speakers by our attendees at our conference, and we're so excited to have her today on our webinar. I am going to pass the baton over to her. To start her presentation. Thank you, Alice Lee.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
I hope everybody else can hear me and you can see my screen.
I cannot see your screen yet.
Okay, hold on just one second.
There we go. I can see it now.
Okay, are we ready to roll then?
Yes, thank you.
Hi everybody, it's Alice Lee. I'm very happy to be here and I have high regard for Carmen. So thank you, Carmen, for working the technology on all of this so we can do this today. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and talk about the 5 secrets to a fabulous fundraising board. I met some of you, I hope, at last year's FAM conference in Naples, and also had the privilege of working with some museums throughout the state. So it's a pleasure to do this. As Carmen said, we will do 2 polls. We'll have time for questions throughout. And really, this is an opportunity for you to, ask questions and share feedback and whatnot. So we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible at the same time that you could be eating your lunch and whatnot at your desk today. So I wanted to start with a little cartoon that I have here in my office. So imagine a little 4-panel cartoon. And the first panel is a picture of a board member who's sitting at a board table, and the caption says, "I love serving on this board." And then the second panel says, I love the meetings, I love the packets of important information. And then the third panel says, I love the lunches and the nice people. And then you get to the fourth panel and it says, what's the name of this organization again? I'm sure none of you have board members like that. Particularly when the discussion turns to fundraising. I'm sure they're all totally engaged and raring to go, but for those that are not, we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking about this issue, which for many nonprofits and museums and organizations of all kinds, it's a challenge, and it's also a big part of what the board is asked to do, and really plays a really important role in doing that can't be replicated by staff. So here are our learning objectives. First, we'll talk about the bad news, why fundraising fails. We don't have wine to go with that today, I'm sorry to say, but anyway, we will talk about why fundraising fails. Then we'll talk about and celebrate the role of the board in fundraising, and even talk about some practical ways that they can and should be involved. And then we'll also make sure that we talk about the difference between fundraising and fund development, and again, what the board's role is in that process. So that's what we're going to spend our time talking about. One thing I wanted to share, since I'm sitting here in my office today rather than being in front of you all in person, one of the books on my shelf that I've had forever, it's called The Raising of Money by James Gregory Lord. And one of the things that's in his book that's always resonated with me, and I think it's particularly pertinent for boards, which is money isn't given, it has to be raised. Money isn't offered, it has to be asked for. And money doesn't just come in, it has to be gone after. So I think that's a lesson really inherent in working with our boards, because unfortunately, I think often they think the money does just come in and, oh, well, we're such a great museum, such a great organization, of course people are going to support us. And of course, you and I know that the reality is you have to ask, and you also have to earn the right to ask. So that's what we're going to talk about. So if this is what you're here for, you're in the right spot. And if you hear something fabulous, or you just want to share your comments on Twitter, you can do that. We'd love for you to do that at Florida Museums. I'm at Stansbury CFRE, and then there's some hashtags. So there we go. All right, well, let's start with our first poll, Carmen. We wanted to ask you all to rate the overall effectiveness of your board. Fundraising effectiveness of your board. And so your choices are poor, fair, good, and great.
Okay, I am switching this back over to me, and let me pull that poll up for you so you all can answer it. All right, here's the poll. If you could quickly just click on one of these choices, we'll give you about 10 seconds to answer. About 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll now. And here are our results. Can you see that, Alice Lee?
I can, actually.
So we have 31% poor, 62% fair, and 8% that consider their fundraising effectiveness of their board as good. I'm going to pass this back over to you. Okay, there you go.
Got it. Okay, well, the bad news is most of you said fair. The good news is you're in the right place, because this is what we're going to talk about, and you all know from your own experience what a challenge it is if your board's effectiveness at fundraising is it fair or worse. And we didn't have any that said great. So I know this is a big part of what executive directors and development directors spend a lot of time on, is how do we engage our board in this process. And so, like I said, the good news is you're in the right place. So let's keep rolling. This is one of my favorites. The kid sitting there, well, with the sign, raising money.
Alice, I'm sorry for interrupting. I need you to share your screen again. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
There you go. I can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. So the kid saying, family killed by ninjas, need money for karate lessons. So part of, I think, the challenge is that the board has to know what they're raising money for. And of course, they know your mission and they probably know your key programs. But sometimes I think there's a disconnect between the broad strokes. This is our mission. This is what our museum does. This is what we're all about. These are our key programs. And really, what it is a donor would be asked to invest in. Because even though we love smaller gifts, when it comes to fundraising, we're really looking for those, not just bigger gifts, but bigger investments. And so we'll talk more about that. I also think, you know, their passion for it has a lot to do with their effectiveness. And the third thing I would say is that I think when board and staff are working together, so you got a CEO or development director and a board member together going and calling on someone and asking for the gift, to me, that's the dynamic duo, and just super, super effective. And having, for those of you that are CEOs and you feel like you're the lone wolf and you're making all these calls and you can't get board member involvement, I think it results in, potentially can result in money being left on the table. We'll talk more about that as well. So let's keep rolling and talk about Alice Lee's 6 reasons for why fundraising fails. We could probably spend the next hour of this webinar talking about all the reasons that we think fundraising fails. But in my 25 plus years of experience, I think it really comes down to 6 primary reasons. And some of these may resonate with you. And if it does, I think part of having the fundraising program work and be more successful and the board be more engaged is understanding what's not working, you know, understanding maybe what the problem is. And so with that, I will roll to my first one, which is why I think fundraising fails, is that there's no written fundraising plan, which is what I mean by the bullseye here, because I think a series of strategies is not the same thing as a plan. So as a museum, you have a membership drive, maybe you have an annual gala, maybe you have a series of events throughout the year at, you know, when a new exhibit opens, maybe you do a direct mail at a certain time, maybe something at year end. I mean, that's a series of strategies. That is not a fundraising plan, and we're going to talk more about that. The other thing that I see is that if you don't have a fundraising plan, you don't have anything written, then what I see organizations doing is one of 2 things. First one being ready, aim, 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 which means we're doing a lot of talking about fundraising, but we're basically not doing very much fundraising. We're relying on our grants and our contracts and our earned income, and basically we're trying to avoid doing the fundraising and hoping all those other things that we do will bring in the revenue that we need. The other option that I've seen, the flip side of that, is ready, fire, 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 which is we don't really know what's working. We don't really know how to raise the most money. We're just basically going to throw everything against the wall and keep throwing it and wait to see what sticks. And that may be what your organization has been experiencing, but either way, I think the solution, or part of the solution to that, is having a written fundraising plan. So we'll talk more about that, because the reason I think that fundraising fails is that too many organizations have a series of strategies and not a plan. So the next reason that I think fundraising fails is that there's no board ownership of that plan, meaning it was drafted by the development director or by the CEO, or maybe a combination, and you know, we kind of cooked it up ourselves and looked at what we did last year and put some numbers down and incorporated it into the budget and maybe even put it into the strategic plan, and there was no vetting, no kicking of the tires, no engagement with the board in how that goal is developed. And I think that skipping over that is another reason why fundraising fails. Oh, sorry, pardon me. Okay, so here's the next one. This is one of my favorites. I call this one unrealistic expectations. And as a consultant, I will say I get those calls fairly frequently. Hi, Alice Lee. we need to raise, an extra $200,000 because we don't have this grant, or we don't have this, or we don't have that. And then my next question is, well, how many donors do you have? And the answer is 17, and they've all given, $25 or less over the last 3 years. So part of why I think fundraising fails is these unrealistic expectations. This is how much money we get in grants and contracts and earned revenue. And let's say that's $1 million, and it costs $2 million to run our organization. So therefore, our fundraising goal is $1 million. Even if there's no connection between that $1 million and how many donors you have, what you raised last year, how many staff you have dedicated to fundraising, what level of experience you have on the staff with fundraising, public awareness of your campaign, of your organization, visibility and respect for board leadership, staff leadership. It just goes on and on and on. So I think one of the reasons that fundraising fails is those goals are unrealistic. Next, I think fundraising fails because, and this is going to sound crazy when I say it, but no one is asking for money. The money is essentially being left on the table. And the reason that I say that, I do a lot of development audits with organizations where I come in and I'm assessing, what's working, what's not working, where are the gaps, where are the missed opportunities. And I am asked to do that and hired to do that because the organization's not raising the amount of money that it needs or wants to raise. And so I'm trying to figure out what the issue is, what the problems are, where the gaps are. And very often what I find out is the reason the organization is not raising money is because nobody is asking. And I've been doing development a long time, and I imagine some of you have been too. And even if you haven't, the worst thing ever is you open up the front page of your newspaper or on your app or your phone, and you see, your best donor or your best prospective donor to your organization just made a really big gift to some other nonprofit organization. So that's kind of, if you're not asking, somebody else is. So, okay. So another reason that I think fundraising fails is that too often fabulous nonprofit organizations are simply not telling their best story. So on the screen here, you see 2 photos. This is from the BP oil spill in the Gulf a couple years ago when the Horizon thing blew up. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you see just vast amounts of toxic, nasty, gross oil spewing into the Gulf. And on the right-hand side, you see the Pelican covered in oil. So my question to you would be, which one's going to raise more money? And the answer is the Pelican. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Mainly, it's because I can't solve what I can see happening on the left. I can't fix that. I can't solve that ginormous problem of millions of gallons of oil, but I can help. I can get some Dawn out, and I can give you some money, and you can wash that Pelican right off, and he can fly away. So, too often, I think, when we are talking about why donors should give, even though there are a lot of global issues that your organization is seeking to solve, the reason you have your museum is to build a better community, is to help children become the best adults that they can be, and give people quality of life, and celebrate and remember history, and all the things that museums do. And all those things are great. But when it comes to making that individual gift, I've got to be able to kind of hold it in my hand and understand how my gift will help solve this problem, and in a tangible way. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the bottom line is, I think sometimes our fundraising fails because we're not telling the right story, or we're not telling the best story. The next reason why fundraising fails, and I've got here my missing in action, is because too often there's no CEO involvement, or I would say limited CEO involvement. And if we have any CEOs on the line, as CEO, executive director, president, chief muckety muck, you are the face of the organization, and there will be donors particularly ones who would consider a bigger gift, that are not going to make that bigger gift unless they know, like, and trust you. So the bigger the gift, the bigger the importance is of the CEO having a relationship with the prospective donor, and for that trust and whatnot to be there. So we'll talk more about that. So I know there are other reasons why fundraising fails, but I really think those are the 6 big ones. I'm going to pause here and throw out if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, anything that I've said so far about why fundraising fails, what your experience in your museum has been about why fundraising fails, or any questions or comments that you want to make on what I've covered so far.
If you have any questions, you can just type them into the chat box. I don't see anything so far, Alice Lee.
Okay. Well, maybe I did such a good job of why fundraising fails that everybody's left their desk and run out of the building, or said, forget it, I'm giving up. All right. Well, as you think of something as we go along, feel free to put it in the chat box, or let us know, because we really do want your comments and your feedback. Okay, so now let's go to the fun part. Let's talk about the secrets. What do I think are the secrets? And I picked 5. Obviously, we could do a lot more than that, but again, based on my experience, what do I think are the 5 secrets for having a really fabulous fundraising board? And I think the first one starts with educating your board about what fundraising is and about what fundraising isn't. And a couple things there. I think sometimes, we go after people, we cultivate people to be on our board because they've served on other influential boards in the community and they're well connected. And quite frankly, I think sometimes they bring bad habits from some of those other boards that they've served on, and misperceptions and things that they've learned or thought they knew get reinforced. And one of those big ones is that fundraising isn't about money. Even though that's what my picture is here, fundraising is not about money. Donors, when they give, do not want to solve your museum's need for money. They don't want to help you, end up in the black at the end of the fiscal year. They give because of their interests, their passion for what you do, the relationship that they have with your organization or with the people in your organization. They want to leave a legacy. There's a lot of reasons that why people give, which is why fundraising is about that, and it's not about money. My favorite definition of fundraising is Hank Rosso's definition, which is the gentle art of teaching people the joy of giving. So I think sometimes we overlook this a little bit too much. The other thing I would say is that even if you've got fundraising information and an orientation around fundraising as part of your onboarding of new board members, that's not enough. Even if it's really great content, it's not enough. That's a good first step, as is talking to them about the fundraising requirements before they even consider joining your board and before you even consider inviting them. But I think one of the secrets to this is to be continually educating the board about what fundraising is, what it isn't, how it works. I just came back from the Planet Philanthropy, the state fundraising conference. Of course, the FAMF conference happens every year where you get this information. And it's important that we impart that information to our boards and help deepen their knowledge of how fundraising really works and what it really takes to be successful. I start a lot of my fundraising classes with, there's no shortage of donors, there's only a shortage of askers. So we've got to do more, I think, to educate and engage our board in fundraising throughout their tenure as a board member and help them either be an asker or be part of the process. So Again, if you have any comments or questions as we go along, feel free to type them in the comment box, and I'll pause at any time to answer them. The next secret, I think, is to really start at the beginning. And again, this may seem kind of basic, but I think it's important that boards recognize the need for fundraising, the desire for fundraising. Even if you had every grant and every earned income and every dollar that you ever wanted coming in the door, fundraising is the part of the process where there's a role for people outside of the organization to invest in it, to support it. And I think when fundraising is presented as mission, fundraising is mission. Fundraising is the air that you breathe. Fundraising is just as important as what it is your organization does. That really sets the table and sets the stage for creating that culture of philanthropy, instead of fundraising, being that kind of necessary evil, that dirty word that, well, we've put this off as long as possible. Now we've finally got to talk about all this fundraising stuff. And it takes time to get to this point. I think it takes a recognition that maybe there is some of that attitude pervasive, or in the minds and hearts of some of the board members. I've also seen it in the minds and hearts of staff members, including people who do fundraising full time. So I think it makes it a lot harder to be successful if fundraising is not embraced as mission. This is an opportunity for people to invest in why we exist, which is important for our community. This is also, I think, undermines or underscores, I should say, the reason why 100% board giving is also critical. If you've been to any fundraising workshop ever in your life, you've heard that, I'm sure, 1,000 times. The bottom line is, as board members, they have to be, and as staff members, I think too, you have to be buying whatever it is you're selling. And if you've ever gone out to get a sponsorship from the Honda dealership for your special event, and the person you sent rolled up onto the Honda dealership in their Toyota, believe me when I tell you, those Honda people saw that Toyota the second it came on the lot. So it's important to address these expectations up front. It's important to make it a priority to have 100% board giving. And as I said earlier, to really prioritize year-round board education, not just that one-time orientation. And if you have any comments or thoughts about this, I would be happy to hear them. I do think that I've worked with organizations where, again, they've got a pretty good orientation program, but there really isn't an understanding within the board that fundraising is mission, and just a big inherent and in everything that the organization. Okay, I'll turn back to Carmen for our second question, which is whether or not your board members are all making an annual personal gift.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can launch this straight from here without switching over, so you let me know if you see it. Can you see that?
I can see a little sign that says, this says organizer must close poll to enable screen sharing.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I'll switch that over.
Okay.
Okay, the poll is in progress. Looks like several people have already responded. And again, can you repeat the question one more time for me, Allison?
Right. Yes. Do 100% of current board members make an annual personal gift to your organization? Yes or no?
Okay.
Do 100% of current board members make
Okay, your audio kind of is going out a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and
Like
share
an
the results.
annual person.
Yeah, for some reason your audio is going out, Alice Lee. I don't know if you changed the speaker or not, but we've got 31% that said yes, 100% make a gift, and 69% who said no. So I'm going to switch back over the sharing to you, Alice Lee, and you'll just have to press share. Alice Lee, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, there you are.
So I was just trying to show my screen again. Is it there?
Yes, ma'am. It is. Thank you.
Okay. So that's really interesting. 69% said no. So I'd love to hear some comments as to does that mean you've got, everybody but one or everybody but two, or is that because it's really not an expectation? Now, as museums, I could see where you would ask every board member to be a member. And maybe that could be the way that you ask every board member to contribute. And of course, you have different levels of membership. I know in working with some museums, I've worked with some staff and even a board chair who was pretty frustrated that people were serving on a board and making all these big decisions and technically supposed to be really invested in the organization, and they were giving, at the lowest possible membership level. I also know some other organizations, and I'm thinking of one museum now when I say that, where they have several levels of membership and board members are expected to be giving at that higher level. So, maybe you have individual, family, something, and then maybe there's like a patron level. And so all board members are expected to be patron members, which basically means they're covering that membership and giving beyond that. So I think there's a lot of different ways that this can be done. I think the bottom line, though, is that when 69%, I mean, I'll speak frankly, if I were your prospective donor or I were the CEO of a corporation or a foundation in particular, and your organization came to me and said, because they said, well, we're not all giving to our organization, but we really want you to. I just think you lose a lot of credibility. And of course, those of you on the call that are CEOs, that that's becoming pretty standard question on all grant applications and private foundations, and even some savvy donors that I know. They want to know that the board is behind the organization as demonstrated by their giving. And otherwise, they're not going to make a gift, or certainly not make a major gift. I don't know if any of you follow the Whiny Donor on Twitter. She's at the Whiny Donor. It's hilarious, but it's also kind of the ugly truth sometimes in the things that she posts about, from the donor's perspective, what we as a sector do well, and unfortunately, oftentimes what we don't do well. So you might want to check her out on Twitter.
Hey, Alice.
So
I do have 4 different comments specifically about in relation to your question about wondering why. It's kind of
okay.
Those questions. Do you want me to just read those real quick, one at a time?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first one is from Carla, and she says the expectation for all members to participate is low. We have a few newer people who do step up. Some of the longtime members are reluctant to give. So that was from Carla. And then Thomas says, in my organization, it is an expectation, but I would say only half are members or donate annually. There are some staff that don't think we should force the board members to donate since they volunteer their time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that was from Thomas. And then Leslie says, most make small personal gifts. Only a couple don't do any gift, even though we stress it as being part of a board member. Again, that was Leslie. And then Diane said, I didn't think membership is fundraising as much as it is relationship building. So just 4 responses to that particular comment.
Give me that last one again, please.
I didn't think membership is fundraising as much as it is relationship building.
Right. Okay. Okay, just jotting that down. Well, interesting comments. Thank you so much for sharing them. I thought it was interesting, the first person who said that longtime members were reluctant to give. So I don't know if that's a holdover from the days when maybe there wasn't the need for as much fundraising, but that kind of goes back to what I was saying about setting that expectation that fundraising really is its mission. I mean, even if you were getting all the money you needed to run your operations on a daily basis, the only way your organization is really going to grow and move from doing kind of keeping the plate spinning and maintaining the status quo to advancing the organization is going to be through philanthropy. And so I'm guessing those longtime members maybe weren't expected to give back in the day, and they've just held on to that. That makes me think a little bit about term limits and how important it is that there be turnover in boards, so that if you have folks that are there but not giving and not contributing, and just come to your meetings and eat a turkey sandwich and show up for something. I mean, they may be lovely people, but they're not really fulfilling the responsibility of a board member, which is a pretty high standard. The next person who said, Thomas, who said, only there is an expectation to give, but only half give, and that staff sometimes doesn't really push it because they think, well, they're giving their time. And I've heard that before. I've heard staff say it. I've heard board members say it. So that would be, your organization runs on money. And again, if they want to give time, if people want to give time, of course you're grateful for it. You love your volunteers. You cultivate your core of volunteers, and you're thrilled to have those people that happily volunteer in your organization in a variety of ways. But that's being a volunteer. Being a board member is both. Being a board member is that next step up, that I'm volunteering my time, I'm sharing my expertise, I'm leading by example, and I'm going to be a donor, and I'm an advocate. So that's where I think the difference is. If they just want to give their time, that's great, but they shouldn't really be taking a slot on the board. If that's what they're able to and willing to commit, then they're a volunteer. They're not a leadership volunteer. They're not a board member. And then I guess Leslie said some give a small personal gift, and then some don't give at all. I mean, I've been asked this question before. Well, Alice Lee, is it better to have 100% board giving or to have everybody give at the same amount? And I know I've seen it work both ways. So by the same amount, I mean, some organizations say all board members are expected to give $250 a year. And that way it kind of sets that, sets the expectation. And then it's pretty easy to go back to people and say, you knew when you joined that it was $250 and you haven't given $250. Personally, I think 100% giving is the best option, because inevitably you're going to have people on your board that $50 to $100 is a major gift, and then you're going to have people on your board that $5,000 would be a comfortable gift for them and a major gift for them. And so if you set a level, you inevitably probably leave some money on the table, in that even if I have the capacity to give you $5,000 and you ask for $250, I'm giving you $250. And then the last comment about, membership isn't fundraising, it's relationship building. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, the great thing about, one of the assets that I think a museum has that a human service organization or other organizations don't have is that you have this built-in membership base. You have this way for people to join, and in many cases to come and see and touch and participate in the programs that you offer. And I think it's a great cultivation tool. That said, you're going to have people, if you had 1,000 members, you're going to have a bunch of them that for them, their membership is like a gym membership. Like they pay their membership to the museum so that they can go 10 times a year, or they can go when their grandchildren are in town, or they can go when they have guests from out of town and they can have guest passes. And so that's why they pay, you know, $150 a year, $100 a year, family membership, whatever it is, just like they would a gym membership, which is not the same thing as this organization is really important to me and to the community and to the future of our community. And so I'm going to make, you know, a contribution. That said, I think membership programs are tremendous relationship builders because most museums host membership only events and activities, and so there's just so much engagement opportunity. And I think it's such an advantage that FAM members have, is that the nature of your organization is one in which people can really engage. So thank you so much for your responses and for your comments, and feel free to keep them coming. I'm going to keep rolling now with secret number 3. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen. It's just still, there we go. Yep, secret number 3. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So in my experience, the most successful fundraising is led and actively supported by the chief executive. So that was one of my reasons that I think fundraising fails. So if you're a CEO and you've hired a development director, or you've hired a director of membership, or you've hired a major gift officer or whatever, that, which is fabulous that you have that extra person, that doesn't absolve you as the chief muckety muck from that fundraising responsibility. And as I said earlier, there will be people that simply expect to be cultivated, engaged, and asked by you because you are the highest ranking official in the organization. If any of you have read any of the Gerald Panis books that he wrote over the years, asking, also mega gifts, mega givers, in that one, he went around and interviewed 50 donors, 50 people who had all made a single gift of $1 million or more to one organization. So first of all, how cool would that be? To go around and interview and talk with 50 people who all made a single gift of $1 million or more to one organization. And so he just asked them, why did you give? What was the process? What, you know, how did all that happen? Why do you give? And what was interesting to me about it is that of all the 50 people that he interviewed, he said there was only one common denominator across all 50, where they all answered this question the same way. And the common denominator is that they all had a personal and trusted relationship with the chief executive. Which, if you think about it, makes sense. Think about your own personal giving. How well would you have to know the chief executive, the leadership of an organization, in order to make a big gift, or potentially the biggest gift you've ever made? Now, maybe for you that's 5,000, maybe that's 2,000, maybe that's 10,000, maybe that's 25,000, whatever it is. But I think CEOs who have a tremendously overwhelming job, but I also think they underestimate how important their visibility and their active participation in fundraising is to the success of the overall fundraising effort. If nothing else, to model it for staff and for board. So I could kind of keep going on my soapbox about that. The other thing that I would say is that I think that the CEO, as part of their fundraising responsibilities, really need to use some of that time to build relationship with board members, to know your board members personally, to know why they give, to know what motivates them, to know what it is about your organization that they love the best, and what why they give. So one thing that I like to do sometimes is to ask folks, so in the margins or somewhere on a piece of paper at your desk, wherever you're sitting, I'm going to give you what I call the relationship quiz. So get ready to write down a couple of these things. First of all, think of the board member who either is your best fundraiser or has the potential to be your best fundraiser. So get that person in your mind, and then off to the side somewhere, jot down that person's either their spouse's first name, their significant other, their children, just a significant person in their life. What is that person's first name? The next thing to write down is, for your board member, what is their favorite hobby? Next, where was their last vacation? And finally, what's their favorite food? I will say I did this one time, and somebody in a session when I was in the room, and somebody raised their hand and said, if I know their favorite drink, does that count? I said, yes, it does. So if you know favorite food or favorite drink. So the question I would ask you is, were you able to answer all 4 of those? Do you know their spouse, partner, significant other's first name? Do you know their favorite hobby, their last vacation, and favorite food? And the reason I say that is, if you do, that's an indication that you know them, that you have built or are building a relationship with them. And you combine that with knowing how they first got involved, when they made their first gift, why they made their first gift, what they give to, why do they give to it. It just goes a long way towards engaging your board members, not only in their service to the board, but in particular in fundraising, because that's essentially what has to happen between board members and CEOs and prospective donors. So CEOs, if you're on this call, I want to pump up your tires and encourage you strongly to make sure that you are carving out some time, and a pretty significant part of your time, to be the face of your fundraising program, and to be actively engaged, and to be building first relationships with your board members, so that then together you can go out and build relationships with your donors, members, and prospective donors and members. Okay, my soapbox popped up on that one. I'm going to move on. So this is secret number 4, which is about what I call helping board members kind of find their niche in the process. I think when people think about fundraising, first of all, I think as part of your education, you have to demystify what the fundraising process is, because most people think fundraising is asking. And we'll talk more about that in the next slide. But let me give you a story, an example of what I'm talking about. For over 10 years, I worked for a local hospice organization where I was doing fundraising. And we had a gentleman who joined our board. He was a local realtor, in fact, one of the top realtors in our community, just all over everywhere, very successful, high profile. And he had lost his son, his teenage son, to a brain tumor, who died in the hospice program. So after he joined the board, I was the development director, and had a conversation with him, and I went to the CEO and I said, I'd like to invite John to go with me on a speaking engagement. If he's willing, I think he could do a good job. Do you have any objections? And she said, no, it sounds fine. So we did. We went out. I can't remember where we went the first time, but I called John and I asked him if he would go with me. And I said, all I want you to do is just talk, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes about what hospice has meant to you and your family. Well, let me tell you what. It was, and still is to this day, one of the most effective personal testimonies that I've ever heard. And believe me when I tell you, by the time he finished talking about the final days of his son's life, it was hard to not have a dry eye in the room. And what I learned from that experience was that was going to be his gift. That was going to be his contribution. He was never, as I learned and got to know him better, I figured out he can ask for the business. He can ask, can I sell your house for you? But he really wasn't willing and maybe able to ask for the gift. But what he was willing to do, and super effective at doing, was telling his story, which is just an amazing way to educate and cultivate and motivate people to give. So let me tell you, John and I did a lot of speaking engagements, and it's one of the things I think of when I think about helping board members kind of find their niche in the process, and recognizing that they don't have to be good at every part of the fundraising effort. They don't have to be good at membership if that's kind of your gateway to fundraising within your organization. And early in my fundraising career, I'll say I thought my job was to help every board member be super knowledgeable about all the steps in the fundraising process. And it took me a while to figure out they didn't have to do that, which really leads me to this next screen about what the fund development process is. And of course, you can't have a fundraising webinar without the fund development process. I don't have the donor pyramid up here, but we can't have a fundraising webinar without this. But this, and you guys know this, you've seen this, it's just a reminder that there's lots of steps in this process. So if I was reaching out to Carmen and I said, "Hi Carmen, I'm Alice Lee. I'm here from the Florida Association of Museums. I'd like to ask you for a $1,000 gift. May I have your support, please?" And hopefully she would say yes. That's fundraising. Asking Carmen for the gift is fundraising. Fund development is everything that should have happened before I asked Carmen for the gift, asking for the gift, and then everything that comes after. And so in my experience, board members who really understand this and recognize that sitting in a room and starting at number one, identifying, saying, well, who might want to give to us? You know, let's call fill in the blank. Let's call Bill Gates. Let's call, you know, whoever the muckety muck donor is in your community. I was just in Jacksonville, and so Mrs. Weaver is a big donor there. Or if you're in Orlando, you know, Harry Rosen is a major philanthropist in that community. Or you guys know who all those folks are. So the conversation starts with, well, let's go ask, you know, Oprah. Let's go fill in the blank there. And then the goal or the idea is we're going to go straight from identify. Maybe we spend a little bit of time kind of investigating that person's interest, kind of figuring out what they might be interested in. And then we go straight to number 7. We go straight to solicit. And this, one of the secrets, I think, to fundraising success, particularly with a board, is helping them to understand that a big part of their job is 3, 4, 5, and 6. Educate, cultivate, motivate, involve. And quite frankly, the better job that your organization does between number 2 and number 6, the more money you will raise when you get to number 7. So as a homework assignment to this point, I would suggest that when you get off this webinar, get off this call, go back and look at your fundraising plan. Go back and look, hopefully your written, board adopted fundraising plan, and look for steps in what's in your plan that align with this process. If everything in your plan is identify, solicit, and steward, then you're leaving big chunks. And stewardship, by the way, is not sending an acknowledgement letter. Stewardship is how are we going to report on what we did with your last gift before we ask you again. So the good news is, from a board perspective, is these are ways and opportunities to involve your board in the development process. You might be the one, and they might be helping with identify, but too often I think what we do to our boards is we say, okay, you're a board member, we want you to give us 5 names of people we can go talk to about our museum. And board members don't want to do that. They don't want to give up their 5 friends unless they call them first and say, okay, hey man, I just gave your name to the fundraising membership person at the museum. They're going to call you. So see what you can do. And then, you know, when your project comes up, put me, you know, I'll do for you what you're doing for me. That's not fundraising. The best way to do it is to look at the people who are already giving, your existing members, your existing donors, and determine what can we do to better engage them, to cultivate their interest, to motivate them, inspire them to give to continue giving and potentially give at higher levels if they have that capacity. And then what are we going to do to show them that return on their investment as a stewardship, under stewardship, before we ask them again. So when you get back to your shop, check your plan to make sure you've got all 8 of these steps in your fund development plan, and then go back and put a little B for board or an S for staff, and make sure that everything in the plan isn't just S, that everything you're doing, all these steps are all to be done by staff or staff driven. because you know what's going to happen. You're going to burn out, and it also just lets the board members off the hook, and it also just perpetuates, I think, the idea that it's not really the board's job to do this, when in fact they are, I think, vital. They are vital to the fundraising success of the organization. Okay, let's go to secret number 5. Happy people. And what I'm saying here, my secret is you got to set up board members for success. And I hear this a lot when I'm working with boards, where they'll say, Alice Lee, you know, my development person, my membership person, my CEO, you know, they asked me to call these 5 donors or to write these handwritten notes and to do these 2 or 3 things to cultivate, you know, these donors. And they looked at me and they said, you know, nobody's ever done this with me. And I thought to myself, you know, part of why they don't do it for others is because we haven't done it for them. And so the more that we can do to model it and then set them up for success, so that when they do go out, particularly the very first time they make an ask, if they get a yes, I think it's more important than anything else that they get a yes, independent of the gift amount. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a board member in an organization when I was doing development, and she had personal experiences with the organization, and kind of like my John story, in her case, this was also with hospice. She had one parent that died with hospice and one that died without hospice care. So when we went out to go call on somebody, that she got the appointment, she knew the person, she basically just told them the difference. This is what happened when my mom died, this is what happened when my dad died. And of course, she was very passionate, very articulate, very well spoken, and it was very authentic. And the good news is that when we called on her person and she told her story, by the way, she did not ask for the gift. I did, which was not ideal, but he made a gift. So we get out and it was a modest gift. As I recall, it was $1,000, which was a nice gift, but this was a person who could have written a check, you know, for $100,000. But anyway, we came out of the meeting, we walked to the parking lot, and we were walking back to our cars. And Martha was strutting. I mean, she was like, hey, she was on such a high that we got a gift, that from that point on, she would go with me anywhere and with anybody, and particularly people that she knew. Now, again, it wasn't perfect. She wasn't asking for the gift herself, but that first visit with somebody that she knew and was fairly confident was going to make a gift really set her up for success. And I kind of learned from that. And over time, I've done that, especially when I was in a development role with my development committee members, and CEO and I worked with board members to try to set them up for success, so that their very first visit, their very first ask was a success. And I do think it's important that we do for our board members, in part, what we're asking them that we do for donors, cultivate them. It's another reason that I think asking everybody to give the same amount as a board member is not as effective as meeting with each board member individually and asking them for a gift, just like we want to do with people who are not serving on the board. So that's my secret number 5. And I have a bonus secret. So this is your freebie with the sizzling hamburgers. My bonus secret is that board meetings need to sizzle. And the reason I say that, and I know that's not directly related to fundraising, but yet it is. I don't know about you, but I'm in and out of a lot of board meetings, and many of them are really terrible. They're just not very well orchestrated. They don't motivate. You know, people don't walk out of there feeling all charged up about engaging people in the organization and asking for more gifts. So I think when I see organizations that are really firing on all cylinders, in particular with their fundraising, it's in part because when they come together at board meetings, they are using that time effectively. A couple of suggestions: board meetings that are 75% future focused. So we don't spend 80% of our board meeting accepting and reading reports about what happened 3 months ago. Use of a consent agenda, where items that don't require board action are combined into one item in which the chair asks for a motion to accept. And when it's approved, everybody votes and you move on. So that can include minutes from the previous meeting, committee reports, executive director report. People can ask to have an item removed. People can ask a question or clarification regarding the consent agenda. But if none of those come up, you can call for the motion, and then you don't spend 20 minutes going over all that stuff. Open-ended questions, having an open-ended question about an issue external to your organization. In other words, something that gets the board members talking is also, I think, a secret to a board member that sizzles. And fundraising questions are really good ones to use that for. A mission moment. I know a lot of you are doing this where you highlight some great thing that happened or an experience that someone had in your museum, in your organization, and that just keeps everybody focused on why we're here. A round robin at the end of every board meeting, asking everybody for a comment or, what are your thoughts about today, or you're just anything where you get everybody talking. So that's kind of my bonus secret, and I just say that because I'm in and out of board meetings all the time, and too often they are dull and they are a drag and they don't fuel people for the work that you're asking them to do, which in large part is fundraising related. So another soapbox, I'll move on. So to kind of wrap up, and then I'll open it up for questions. So if you have a question, feel free to start typing it in the chat box now or give it some thought. But I think the secret to fundraising success is, number one, having a highly engaged board. And that's where quality meetings and a great orientation and ongoing education and cultivating them and knowing why they serve, all of that is a big part of having a highly engaged board. The second one is vision. The comment when the nonprofit says, well, why didn't that donor give us $10,000? And the donor says, well, you didn't bring me a $10,000 idea. So this is about vision. This is about, if you expect people or you ask people to give more, you've got to give them a better reason to give more. And it's not just because we need more money. It's not because of the grant that got away. It's because of your mission, because of who you serve, because of going back to why you matter. What is the compelling reason why your organization exists? And also kind of that long-term vision. And then asking. Putting it out in front of people and asking, because if you're not asking, some other organization is, and it could be another museum, it could be another organization in your community, and I know you're all, competing for those charitable dollars in your community with so many organizations doing good work and asking. So why don't I stop there, Carmen, and ask if there are any questions or comments or feedback or frustrations.
If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box now. As you're typing, I'm gonna just remind you, I'll be following up with an email asking for you to fill out a survey. It's quick, it's short, but it will be very helpful as we develop new programs in the future, and also feedback for Alice Lee on her session as well. If you don't feel comfortable or you can't think of a question right now, you can reply to my email, and I will respond to you. But also Alice Lee has a slide coming up next that has her contact information as well if you want to reach out to her separately, if you think of something after the fact. I do have one question that came up just now from Monica.
Okay.
And she asks if you will please clarify what a fundraising plan is as opposed to the strategies.
Okay. Well, the fundraising plan, in my experience, would have maybe 3 or 4 kind of overarching goals. So maybe the first goal is we want to raise $300,000 in our annual fundraising campaign this year. And then the second goal would maybe be around, maybe something around membership. Since you're a museum, we want to build, grow, enhance, diversify, upgrade, whatever it is you want to do with your membership program. Goal 3 should probably be something around those cultivate, educate, motivate steps. We're going to host some events where, the things you're going to do to engage and educate and cultivate people in your mission. And then the 4th goal would probably be around stewardship. What are you going to do to report on results and let people know what you've done with their last gift before you ask again? So going back to what I just said, if your first goal is about, we're going to raise $100,000 in our annual fundraising program this year, the strategies that would be all under goal 1, maybe you have one event, maybe you have a direct mail campaign, maybe you've got some one-on-one asks that you're going to make, or maybe you have a challenge grant from a foundation. If we raise 100,000, they'll match us 100,000. A corporate giving program. I mean, all the things that you would do to be raising, to achieving that goal. So going with what I just said, if goal 4 is all around stewardship, so your strategies there would be, 3 touches that we're going to make with first-time donors within the first 90 days of their gift. Another might be, this is what we're going to do special for legacy donors, anybody that we know that's named our will, your organization in their will or estate plan, or everybody that gives or is a member at this level and above gets invited to an annual cocktail party reception, something. And we're going to send out an investment report. I've also heard it called a gratitude report to all of our donors and members once a year. And then we're going to feature a donor and a member, maybe both, in each issue of our bi-monthly magazine. So those would be 6 strategies that would be under goal 4, which was about stewardship. So I hope, Monica, that's helpful. If you have more specific questions, again, I'd be glad to answer them. And when we get to the next slide, my contact info is there. So feel free to call me or email me, and I'll be glad to talk more in detail with you. Any other comments, Carmen, or questions?
No more questions right now. Monica said thank you.
You're welcome, Monica.
If you want to switch over to your contact information, I can also send this particular slide to everybody when I send them the survey as well.
Right. Well, and you're welcome to have the whole slide deck if that would be helpful. So feel free to send it to everybody that was on the call. I guess what I'll do is just kind of summarize and say that I think passionate volunteers are the ones that raise money. Passionate board members raise money. And so our job is to light the fire in them and to help them understand how fundraising works, what it is, what it isn't, so that they can be successful. Really cultivating their interest and what's driving their willingness to support your organization, to recognize how important they are in all of the steps in the fund development process, which is way more than solicit. And in fact, I would say the fund development process is 90% get to know you and only 10% ask. And yet too often I think board members think, they just want me to ask, or my job is to ask. And sometimes I think staff focuses on, well, why don't you give me 5 names, or why don't you go ask 5 friends, when in reality, you would raise more money if you got those board members cultivating members and donors who already give to the organization and might do more if they had, if they had a reason to do more. Why didn't you give me more money? Well, because you didn't bring me a reason to give more money. I would also suggest, as another homework assignment, to kind of check your fundraising plan. Make sure that it has all these things in it that we've talked about, and that there are key places where the board is really the one helping to drive the strategy and whatnot. Now, as staff, you're the hub to the wheel, but they're going to be donors, particularly donors capable of giving bigger gifts, that are going to expect to hear from and be cultivated by your CEO, your chief executive, as well as your board members. So I'll wrap this up with one of my favorites, which is a fundraising joke. Here it comes. A doctor, a lawyer, and a fundraiser all die and go to heaven. And St. Peter says, "Hello, welcome to heaven. I will grant you each one wish." So the doctor says, "Well, I'd like $1 million." And St. Peter says, "Well, here you go, $1 million. Welcome to heaven." So the lawyer walks up and she says, and St. Peter says, "Well, welcome to heaven. I'll grant you one wish." And the lawyer says, "Well, I'd like $1 billion." And St. Peter says, "Well, here you go, $1 billion. Welcome to heaven. Come on in." So the fundraiser walks up and St. Peter says, "Welcome to heaven. I'll grant you one wish." And the fundraiser says, "Can I just have the business cards of the two people that came in ahead of me?" Yes, but I'm bumped. Okay, so there's your fundraising joke of the day. I do hope this was helpful. I know that fundraising is a big part of what you do, and of course, it's a big part of how your organization can be successful and your mission can be fulfilled. And it's hard work. If there's anything I can do to help you, or you have a follow-up question, there's my contact info. Feel free to reach out. And again, thanks to Carmen, our technology wizard, and just for asking me to do this. I'm really happy that I could, and I appreciate being asked.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm going to put that under my title now, Technology Wizard.
Woo-hoo! You go, girl.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Again, I'll send you all an email so you'll have all this information. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out after the fact. Thank you, Ashley. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Go raise money. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.